Well, hi there, folks, and welcome back to Fireside Chat with Mrs. Kraft. This is part two of Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? So, we're going to go ahead and continue our saga of Connie. If you're reading with our packet, you are on page 45, I'm sorry, 49. And we're kind of in the upper middle part of the page. So Connie has just returned from her time with Eddie, the boy she met at the drive-in restaurant. And so we're going to go ahead and dive right back in. Here we go. The next morning, June asked her how the movie was, and Connie said, so-so. She and that girl and occasionally another girl went out several times a week, and the rest of the time Connie spent around the house. It was summer vacation, getting in her mother's way and thinking, dreaming about the boys she met. But all the boys fell back and dissolved into a single face that was not even a face, but an idea, a feeling, mixed up with the urgent, insistent pounding of the music and the humid night air of July. Connie's mother kept dragging her back to the daylight by finding things for her to do, or saying suddenly, "What's this about the Pettinger girl?" And Connie would say nervously, "Oh, her, that dope." She always drew thick, clear lines between herself and such girls, and her mother was simple and kind enough to believe it. Her mother was so simple, Connie thought, that it was maybe cruel to fool her so much. Her mother went scuffling about the house in old bathroom slippers and complained over the telephone to one sister about the other. Then the other called up, and the two of them complained about the third one. If June's name was mentioned, her mother's tone was approving. And if Connie's name was mentioned, it was disapproving. This did not mean she disliked Connie. And actually, Connie thought that her mother preferred her to June just because she was prettier. Rather arrogant of her to think that, don't you think? It's just always something I've thought about. But the two of them kept up a pretense of exasperation, a sense that they were tugging and struggling over something of little value to either of them. Sometimes, over coffee, they were almost friends. But something would come up. Some vexation that was like a fly buzzing suddenly around their heads, and their faces went hard with contempt. One Sunday, Connie got up at 11, none of them bothered with church, and washed her hair so that it could dry all day long in the sun. Her parents and sister were going to a barbecue at an aunt's house, and Connie said no, she wasn't interested, rolling her eyes to let her mother know just what she thought of it. "Stay home alone then," her mother said sharply. Connie sat out back in a lawn chair and watched them drive away. Her father, quiet and bald, hunched around so that he could back the car out. Her mother with a look that was still angry and not at all softened through the windshield. And in the back seat, poor old June, all dressed up as if she didn't know what a barbecue was, with all the running, yelling kids and the flies. Connie sat with her eyes closed in the sun, dreaming and dazed, with the warmth about her as if this were a kind of love, the caresses of love. And her mind slipped over onto thoughts of the boy she had been with the night before, and how nice he had been, how sweet it always was. Not the way someone like June would suppose, but sweet, gentle, the way it was in movies and promised in songs. And when she opened her eyes, she hardly knew where she was. The backyard ran off into weeds and a fence-like line of trees. And behind it, the sky was perfectly blue and still. The asbestos ranch house that was now 3 years old startled her. It looked small. She shook her head as if to get awake. It was too hot. She went inside the house and turned on the radio to drown out the quiet. She sat on the edge of her bed, barefoot, and listened for an hour and a half to a program called XYZ Sunday Jamboree, record after record of hard, fast, shrieking songs she sang along with, interspersed by exclamations from Bobby King. And look here, you girls at Napoleon's, Son and Charlie want you to pay real close attention to this song coming up. And Connie paid close attention herself, bathed in a glow of slow-pulsed joy that seemed to rise mysteriously out of the music itself and lay languidly about the airless little room, breathed in and breathed out with each gentle rise and fall of her chest. After a while, she heard a car coming up the drive. She sat up at once, startled, because it couldn't be her father so soon. The gravel kept crunching all the way in from the road. The driveway was long, and Connie ran to the window. It was a car she didn't know. It was an open jalopy, painted a bright gold, that caught the sunlight opaquely. Her heart began to pound, and her fingers snatched at her hair, checking it, and she whispered, "Christ, Christ," wondering how bad she looked. The car came to a stop at the side door, and the horn sounded 4 short taps, as if this were a signal Connie knew. She went into the kitchen and approached the door slowly, then hung out the screen door, her bare toes curling down off the step. There were 2 boys in the car, and now she recognized the driver. He had shaggy, shabby black hair that looked crazy as a wig, and he was grinning at her. "I ain't late, am I?" "Who the hell do you think you are?" Connie said. "Told you I'd be out, didn't I?" "I don't even know who you are." She spoke sullenly, careful to show no interest or pleasure, and he spoke in a fast, bright monotone. "Calm down over there." Connie looked past him to the other boy, taking her time. He had fair brown hair with a lock that fell onto his forehead. His sideburns gave him a fierce, embarrassed look, but so far he hadn't even bothered to glance at her. Both boys wore sunglasses. The driver's glasses were metallic and mirrored everything in miniature. "You want to come for a ride?" he said. Connie smirked and let her hair fall loose over one shoulder. "Don't you like my car? New paint job," he said. "Hey." "What?" "You're cute." She pretended to fidget, chasing flies away from the door. "Don't you believe me or what?" he said. "Look, I don't even know who you are," Connie said in disgust. "Hey, Ellie's got a radio, see? Mine's broke down." He lifted his friend's arm and showed her the little transistor radio the boy was holding. And now Connie began to hear the music. It was the same program that was playing inside the house. "Bobby King," she said. "I listen to him all the time. I think he's great." "He's kind of great," Connie said reluctantly. "Listen, that guy is great. He knows where the action is." Connie blushed a little because the glasses made it impossible for her to see just what this boy was looking at. She couldn't decide if she liked him or if he was just a jerk. And so she dawdled in the doorway and wouldn't come down or go back inside. She said, "What's all that stuff painted on your car?" "Can't you read it?" He opened the door very carefully, as if he were afraid it might fall off. He slid out just as carefully, planting his feet firmly on the ground, the tiny metallic world in his glasses slowing down like gelatin hardening. And in the midst of it, Connie's bright green blouse. "This here's my name to begin with," he said. Arnold Friend was written in tar-like black letters on the side, with a drawing of a round, grinning face that reminded Connie of a pumpkin, except it wore sunglasses. I want to introduce myself. I'm Arnold Friend, and that's my real name. And I'm going to be your friend, honey. And inside the car is Ellie Oscar. He's kind of shy. Ellie brought his transistor radio up to his shoulder and balanced it there. Now, these numbers are a secret code, honey, Arnold Friend explained. He read off the numbers, 33, 19, 17, and raised his eyebrows at her to see what she thought of that. But she didn't think much of it. The left rear fender had been smashed, and around it was written on the gleaming gold background, done by a crazy woman driver. Connie had to laugh at that. Arnold Friend was pleased at her laughter and looked up at her. Around the other side's a lot more. You want to come and see him? No. Why not? Why should I? Don't you want to see what's on the car? Don't you want to go for a ride? I don't know. Why not? I got things to do. Like what? Things. He laughed as if she had said something funny. He slapped his thighs. He was standing in a strange way, leaning back against the car as if he were balancing himself. He wasn't tall, only an inch or so taller than she would be if she came down to him. Connie liked the way he was dressed, which was the way all of them dressed. Tight, faded jeans stuffed into black, scuffed boots, a belt that pulled in his waist and showed how lean he was, and a white pullover shirt that was a little soiled and showed the hard, small muscles of his arms and shoulders. He looked as if he probably did hard work, lifting and carrying things. Even his neck looked muscular, and his face was a familiar face somehow. The jaw and chin and cheeks slightly darkened because he hadn't shaved for a day or two, and the nose, long and hawk-like, sniffing as if she were a treat. He was going to gobble up, and it was all a joke. Connie, you ain't telling the truth. This is your day set aside for a ride with me, and you know it, he said, still laughing. The way he straightened and recovered from his fit of laughing showed that it had been all fake. How do you know what my name is? She said suspiciously. It's Connie. Maybe and maybe not. I know my Connie, he said, wagging his finger. Now she remembered him even better, back at the restaurant, and her cheeks warmed at the thought of how she had sucked in her breath just at the moment she passed him, how she must have looked to him, and he had remembered her. Ellie and I come out here especially for you, he said. Ellie can sit in the back. How about it? Where? Where what? Where are we going? He looked at her. He took off the sunglasses, and she saw how pale the skin around his eyes was, like holes that were not in shadow, but instead in light. His eyes were like chips of broken glass that catch the light in an amiable way. He smiled. It was as if the idea of going for a ride somewhere to someplace was a new idea to him. Just for a ride, Connie, sweetheart. I never said my name was Connie, she said. But I know what it is. I know your name and all about you, lots of things, Arnold Friend said. He had not moved yet, but stood leaning back against the side of his jalopy. I took a special interest in you, such a pretty girl, and found out all about you. Like, I know your parents and sister are gone somewhere, and I know where and how long they're going to be gone. And I know who you were with last night. And your best girlfriend's name is Betty, right? He spoke in a simple, lilting voice, exactly as if he were reciting the words to a song. His smile assured her that everything was fine. In the car, Ellie turned up the volume on his radio and did not bother to look around at them. Ellie could sit in the back seat, Arnold's friend said. He indicated his friend with a casual jerk of his chin, as if Ellie did not count and she should not bother with him. How'd you find out all that stuff? Connie said. Listen, Betty Schultz and Tony Fitch and Jimmy Pettinger and Nancy Pettinger, he said in a chant. Raymond Stanley and Bob Hunter. Do you know all those kids? I know everybody. Look, you're kidding. You're not from around here. Sure. But how come I never saw you before? Sure you saw me before, he said. He looked down at his boots as if he were a little offended. You just don't remember. I guess I remember you, Connie said. Yeah? He looked up at this, beaming. He was pleased. He began to mark time with the music from Ellie's radio, tapping his fists lightly together. Connie looked away from his smile to the car, which was painted so bright it almost hurt her eyes to look at it. She looked at that name, Arnold Friend. And up at the front fender was an expression that was familiar. Man the flying saucers. It was an expression kids had used the year before, but didn't use this year. She looked at it for a while as if the words meant something to her that she did not yet know. What are you thinking about, huh? Arnold Friend demanded. Not worried about your hair blowing around in the car, are you? No. Think maybe I can't drive good? How do I know? You are a hard girl to handle. How come? He said. Don't you know I'm your friend? Didn't you see me put my sign in the air when you walked by? What sign? My sign. And he drew an X in the air, leaning out toward her. They were maybe 10 feet apart. After his hand fell back to his side, the X was still in the air, almost visible. Connie let the screen door close and stood perfectly still inside it, listening to the music from her radio and the boys' radio blend together. She stared at Arnold Friend. He stood there stiffly, relaxed, pretending to be relaxed, with one hand idly on the door handle, as if he were keeping himself up that way, and had no intention of ever moving again. She recognized most things about him. The tight jeans that showed his thighs and buttocks, and the greasy leather boots and the tight shirt, and even that slippery, friendly smile of his, that sleepy, dreamy smile that all the boys used to get across ideas they didn't want to put into words. She recognized all this, and also the sing-song way he talked, slightly mocking, kidding, but serious and a little melancholy. And she recognized the way he tapped one fist against the other, in homage to the perpetual music behind him. But all those things did not come together. She said suddenly, Hey, how old are you? His smile faded. She could see then that he wasn't a kid. He was much older, 30, maybe more. At this knowledge, her heart began to pound faster. That's a crazy thing to ask. Can't you see I'm your own age? Like hell you are. Or maybe a couple years older. I'm 18. 18? She said doubtfully. He grinned to reassure her, and the lines appeared at the corners of his mouth. His teeth were big and white. He grinned so broadly, his eyes became slits, and she saw how thick the lashes were, thick and black, as if painted with a black tar-like material. Then abruptly, He seemed to become embarrassed and looked over his shoulder at Ellie. Him? He's crazy, he said. Ain't he a riot? He's a nut, a real character. Ellie was still listening to the music. His sunglasses told nothing about what he was thinking. He wore a bright orange shirt unbuttoned halfway to show his chest, which was pale, bluish, not muscular like Arnold Friend's. His shirt collar was turned up all around, and the very tips of the collar pointed out past his chin, as if they were protecting him. He was pressing the transistor radio up against his ear and sat there in a kind of daze right in the sun. He's kind of strange, Connie said. Hey! She says you're kind of strange. Kind of strange, Arnold Friend cried. He pounded on the car to get Ellie's attention. Ellie turned for the first time, and Connie saw with shock that he wasn't a kid either. He had a fair, hairless face, cheeks reddened slightly, as if the veins grew too close to the surface of his skin. The face of a 40-year-old baby. Connie felt a wave of dizziness rise in her at this sight, and she stared at him, as if waiting for something to change the shock of the moment, make it all right again. Ellie's lips kept shaping words, mumbling along with the words blasting in his ear. Maybe you two better go away, Connie said faintly. And that concludes part 2 of our reading. So just to kind of recap here what we've learned in this section. So Connie has decided to spend the day by herself at home while her parents and her sister go to a barbecue at an aunt's house. So she's sunbathing and she goes inside to cool off for a little bit. And when she does that, a car pulls up the driveway, and ultimately she recognizes the car and the driver from the drive-in the night before. It was the boy that she had made that eye contact with when she was exiting the drive-in with Eddie, and she had made contact with the other boy. This is now that boy, and he's all of a sudden showed up at her house with a friend of his. And he wants Connie to come out of her house and take a ride in his car with him and his friend. So as the situation progresses here, Connie realizes that Arnold's friend, that's the name of the boy, is actually much older than what he is appearing to be, and so is his friend Ellie. They're both much older than what they are actually claiming to be, close to Connie's age, or maybe slightly older, but she realizes that they're not. We're going to talk later about some interpretations of this, and we know that literally Arnold Friend is supposed to represent Charles Schmid, who is the real life Pied Piper of Tucson, who actually did murder 3 young girls in Tucson, Arizona in the mid-60s. But some literary scholars have also interpreted Arnold Friend's character as being symbolic of the devil or Satan himself. And there's definitely some evidence that would support that interpretation, as well as him being the literal embodiment of the real life murderer, Charles Schmid. So we're going to talk about that later on, but I do want you guys to kind of keep that symbolism in mind as we continue reading the story. Think about how symbolically Arnold Friend may be a representation of Satan himself. So we will continue on. I thank you all for tuning in. Namaste. Have a good night. you want to say goodbye too?